Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and despite a relative improvement in performance from Mercedes with their new upgrade, Lewis Hamilton is not so happy about their qualifying performance, but Toto Wolff does admit that yes, the car has traditionally not gone so well around this particular circuit, and they wouldn't necessarily expect it to have done, but the upgrades are certainly working as intended, especially going into the final few races of the season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, just wanted to mention Ricciardo. Rumour has it he is going to be around the paddock next year in a reserve deal. We heard rumours that potentially he could replace Nick de Vries as Mercedes reserve driver, but apparently now he's going to go to Red Bull. That is the rumour, that a Ricciardo reserve driver at Red Bull is the most likely deal on the table. Kind of weird really if Ricciardo does end up there, right? Because he leaves the team as a number 2 driver and then returns to the team as the number 3 driver. Yeah, I don't know about that, to be honest. If Ricciardo wants to get back in, back in business for 2024, that is his plan. He also ruled out to move to IndyCar because definitely doesn't want to do oval tracks and stuff like this. So yeah, intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. Is that a good move for Ricciardo? Good to see him still around the paddock, but I mean, yeah, if he takes the reserve spot anywhere, I have a hard time believing he's going to get back in. I think his best chance is probably to phone up like a Günther Steiner and say, look, give me that Haas seat, I'll prove my worth. But probably that's going to go to Nico Hülkenberg, is the present rumour over there as well. Ferrari took their 12th pole of the season yesterday, and I believe Sainz's poll actually confirms that Leclerc will have the most pole positions this entire season, regardless of what happens for the last 3 races. I think Verstappen can get 3 poles in a row, and still Leclerc will have more poles than him over the season, which is quite something really to think about, how Verstappen has dominated this championship in terms of where the points count on a Sunday, but yet he is, even if he gets pole the last 3 races, he's not going to have as many poles as Leclerc did this season, despite the fact that Leclerc might not even get second in the drivers. So pretty remarkable from Ferrari. But yeah, again, their 1-lap pace was shown yesterday, and of course, as Sainz even admitted after the race, Red Bull are probably still favourites. Verstappen is still going to be the favourite for the race. Well, we've seen what's happened before, and also tyre deg is going to be a big deal here around Austin. Probably going to be a 2-stop race, and tyre deg is massively important in the heat there. That's where Ferrari have struggled massively the last few races. They can do it over a lap, no problem at all, but over 55 or 60 laps, whatever it is, it's not going to be so easy for them, right? And even generally, Red Bull have better race pace regardless of the fact their tyre deg is much better. Now, one team that has been pretty good on tyre deg so far this season has been Mercedes. They bought a new upgrade this weekend, and Hamilton was really confident actually. FP1, FP3 was feeling really confident in the car, was in a really good spot. Turns out when they got to qualifying though, it became a really difficult beast to handle. Maybe the tailwinds in Sector 1, maybe the slightly cooler track temperature. They're not really sure, but it does seem like the W13 lives on a knife edge, right? It's never good in all circumstances. They can get it into a decent position very briefly, but then if conditions marginally change, the car can be an absolute nightmare. And George Russell was struggling with it, Hamilton was struggling with it, still put in some pretty good laps though. We'll be 3rd and 4th on the grid, of course, with Leclerc going back 10 places and Perez going back 5 places to P12 and P9 respectively. And he reckoned that the car was good, everyone at the factory worked hard, but they weren't really sure why the car was such a handful all of a sudden in the final couple of laps. And I think also one of the things that might have affected them was it was a bit of a mess really on that outlap, right? Because Verstappen did 2 outlaps, so he did 1 outlap and then a prep lap, and he was going so slow that Russell went past him, and then Hamilton was just kind of stuck behind Verstappen, so his tyres weren't really in the best position going into that final Sector 1, and even as you said, I had a great feeling in the car, but we went rearwards mechanically, just 1 step, it's tiny, seemed to make a huge difference, maybe with the temperature drop. So pretty interesting stuff as to what that means for the race, but usually the Mercedes, when it's got a bit of a heavier fuel in there, like it can be a better car in race pace once the tyres come into temperature, but of course it's not going to be easy to challenge the guys up front because of the pace advantage, certainly Verstappen in that Red Bull we would expect to have. Even Andrew Chauvelin goes on to say that no doubt it's affected everyone, the windier conditions, but there were a few corners that were really well balanced yesterday that today we couldn't seem to find a setup to compensate for the increased winds. Qualifying was a disappointment, right? So interesting that Mercedes, I thought honestly they looked pretty good. I mean, yes, they were half a second off in the end the pace of the Ferraris, but for qualifying, given it's a relatively long lap and it's got a couple of long straights, it's not an absolute disaster for Mercedes, you would think, compared to some of the other circuits they've gone to, and especially because there probably was a lap in there if conditions had been right. There might have been even maybe 3 tenths off the pace. There probably was another couple of tenths in the lap that Hamilton managed to do, so it wasn't like an absolute disaster. But Mercedes are disappointed because I think they think that this upgrade is really good, and they've taken a significant step here with kind of weight weight of the car, but also other factors as well. And look, it might not work out here in Kota. It's been a circuit that's been pretty good for them, but not maybe one of their best circuits. And maybe at a track like Brazil, for example, it could potentially be a different story. So we'll see about that. And as he goes on to say, shoveling here, that Lewis was stuck at the back after the kind of preparation lap that Max was doing, so his tyre temperature wasn't ideal going into that sector 1. But he also makes it clear that tyre degradation and tyre management is going to be of critical importance here this weekend. Certainly a track that's going to eat up the tyres, especially in the high temperatures that we will expect to have. And even as Hamilton says, like, he's hoping it's going to be better, but he reckons the guys in front are just a bit too quick. He said this for quite some time, doesn't want to get ahead of himself, of course, but he's starting on the decent side of the grid on, of course, on the second row. So there's a chance the Mercedes can do something. And Verstappen and Sainz have no support from teammates, right? Which, of course, can be a valuable factor in terms of where strategy comes into play. One of the key deficits, though, and I think that Mercedes reached, I thought, honestly, I saw Hamilton get to 3:19 in FP3, but even in Qual 8, the numbers are relatively similar. Mercedes are losing a good 10 kph in a straight line to the Red Bull. So that's Mercedes plus DRS is not much faster than Red Bull, right? Which is obviously quite the big deficit, right? So in terms of overtaking, it's probably not going to happen, right? Let's be honest here. You're probably not going to overtake Red Bull in a straight line. So that means if Mercedes want to win, strategy is going to come into play. And that's a key advantage of Red Bull, really, that yes, they're good in the corners, but in the straights, they're pretty much impossible to overtake. And we've seen that for the majority of this season. But George Russell did say there's opportunities in the race, right? Of course, lots of pit stops, lots of unknowns at play. Has been some thrilling races here. Last year especially was an interesting one in terms of strategy, undercuts. But last year, the reason why Hamilton wasn't really able to get Verstappen at the end was because there's just massive dirty air through that first sector. This year should be a different story. But on the other side of the equation, like, the drivers were thinking, you know what, the car wasn't really in the best spot, but Toto Wolff reckons the updates are pretty much working exactly as planned. He says the updates are working as intended. I think Austin was never that great for us in the past, and here it's worked well. With 0.6 off, could have been 3. So he says if everything went right, there could have potentially been 3-4 off the pace, something like that. I think the update works. We had a lap in us that was 0.3 quicker, but the car is still tricky to drive. I think for tomorrow we could be part of some exciting game. So we'll see if that actually pays out. But interesting that Toto Wolff is actually rather confident that the upgrade that Mercedes brought here is working as intended and has given them a significant performance boost. But look, they've only got 4 more races left to try and win a race this season. Probably not going to be here, but in fairness, this is one of their best chances because Perez and Leclerc are both taking penalties here, which won't be the case, you'd imagine, from now until the end of the season. And just wanted to talk about also their front wing, because that was part of their upgrade package, not the absolute be-all and end-all of it, but it was part of it, that they're not allowed to run, it seems, because the FIA say that the stabilizers are too large. Now, apparently they've had discussions with the FIA, had an exchange with the FIA, and they are thinking of running it in Mexico. So they might have to make some tweaks, small tweaks here or there to make it legal, but they reckon that they probably still can use this front wing. It just seems like these stabilizers are maybe marginally too big for what the FIA thinks should be allowed, because they might create too much outwash for the car behind, which is, let's just say, against the spirit of the regulations. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Ferrari's pace, of course, looked very impressive at qualifying yesterday, but whether they can translate that into the race, it comes a lot down to strategy. A lot of people are expecting 2-stop races, so look, we'll see, because if Sainz can keep the lead over Verstappen, how long will that last? You'd imagine potentially only a few laps, as we've seen many times in the past, but then it's a question of, can the Mercedes compete with the Ferraris? Because if they can, then, who knows what's going to happen, because let's say Sainz is leading off, but then Red Bull's kind of, after the tyre deg phase of the first few laps, Sainz is struggling a little bit, has to pit a little bit early, then Verstappen could be versus the 2 Mercedes, depending on how quickly the other guys get through the field. And that whole, Norris versus Stroll versus Russell battle potentially on the opening lap or so could be pretty spicy as well. So I'm sure there's drama to come, and it does set up for a very exciting race, actually, especially around such a good circuit that Kota is. At least it's a proper racetrack compared to some of the other tracks we get in the US. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.